Do you have a magic notebook? Do you want one? I recommend that every writer should have one, but you can't have mine. The vast majority of writing I do goes directly into Word or a script writing software. I hate writing with pen and paper. But hang on, it's not for the reason you think. I actually love the sensation of putting pen to paper, sketching out ideas for a new book or working my way through plot difficulties with a nice cup of tea and a head full of ideas. I love the smell of paper, the feel of a nice notebook in my hand. I love the nostalgia of the whole experience, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I never feel more like a writer than when I'm scribbling away in my trusty notebook. So why do I hate it? Well, because I'm a productivity gremlin, and that means I get nervous when I'm scribbling in a notebook instead of actually writing my novels. I'm the same with script writing, short stories, everything. I'll get halfway through the outline if I'm lucky before I start diving right into the novel. It's a problem, I know. I'm just so impatient to get started, and I hate the thought of wasting time. But even for someone like me, a notebook and pen are essential to the writing process. Essential! Even for an explorer like myself, I typically don't start writing a new book until I've got at least some idea of the key characters, the plot, the key tension, and the world of the story. I might not have dozens of pages of notes, but at least I'll have a clear picture of where the story is set, who my protagonist is, and where tension and opposition are going to arise from. And where do I work all of that out? In my notebook, of course. I find that sketching out these ideas early helps me focus on what's most important. It allows me to throw a bunch of ideas at the page and start making connections until I land on something I like. I'll draw pictures, circle words and phrases, experiment with names, start thinking about magic systems, and so on. All of this will start with me and my notebook, and usually a cup of tea. But there are other things I use the magic notebook for, including the following. When I sketch an outline, I typically do something like this. Key points linking from one to another to show the basic flow of the story. These won't necessarily represent chapters or even paragraphs, but just key ideas linking from one to another. Usually, a couple of pages like this will represent around 20 to 30,000 words or so. They could be the basic outline of a complete short story, the first movement of a screenplay, or even the script for a first issue of a new comic. It allows me to sketch out ideas very quickly, without getting bogged down into detail. Secondly, it's very easy for me to see connections between different plot threads and ideas, because the detail is very limited. I can fit quite a lot of information on a single page, and that makes it easier to see connections because large sections of the story are laid out in front of me in one place. Thirdly, I can speed up or slow down as often as I want. Typically, at some point during the early outlining process, I'll end up writing some dialogue. I'll hear characters saying something important and need to get that down.
Nothing unusual about a 4 a.m. call to a back alley in downtown Kenton.
Sometimes I'll just add in a quick quote here or there as part of the outlining process, but at other times, when the dialogue really starts to flow, I'll end up writing an entire conversation. The danger with this last point is that this is usually the part where I've blown through my patience and decided it's time to start writing that novel right away. I'll grab what I have and, using the dialogue as a starting point, start building out the book. Whether I refer back to my initial outline notes or not doesn't really matter. The whole exercise helps me conceptualize and understand the story, so when I start writing, I have a relatively firm grasp of what's going on. Typically, a lot will change from the initial sketch to the finished book, but it's amazing how many key details still survive from that rapid outline in my magic notebook. At key points in the writing process, I'll come up against blockages that I just can't get around. The tension is rising, my characters are finding themselves in an increasingly tightening vice, the web of intrigue is starting to get complex, and I need some way of trying to tie everything together, drive the story forwards, and get out of my deadlock. That's where I'll typically sit down again with my magic notebook and start sketching out ideas. I'll write down all of the questions my characters might have and start trying to answer them one by one. Usually, as I start trying to find answers, certain connections will present themselves, and I'll start seeing how I could tie everything together in a way that's both surprising and inevitable to the reader. I'll typically run through several scenarios before landing on something that actually works, and sometimes it can take several days or even weeks for the answers to come to me. I'll come back to the notebook a few times, scribble some words, do some drawings, some nonsensical ideas, and then I'll go away and focus on something else for a while. Eventually, the idea will come to me, whether I'm sketching it in the notebook or later on. But the process of trying to work through plot problems in the notebook is an invaluable part of my writing process. So that's it. That's how I use my magic notebook. I recommend that every writer should have one, even the impatient writers like me. Do you have a magic notebook? Do you want one? Let me know in the comments, and as always, keep it real, keep it safe.